In this video we're going to talk about edible landscapes. We're going to talk about fruit trees and bushes and different plants that we carry that would be nice for a homeowner to have. We try to give you enough information so that you can plant them and have success. We're standing in front of a group of high bush blueberries. Blake, what should they know about planting these?
Well, basically, I mean, if you're going to buy one variety of blueberries, it's always nice to buy a few different varieties. They can help each other out in terms of cross-pollination, so you can get a lot more production and actually get a lot of blueberries you can put on the table.
The high bush blueberries are a little different than our native blueberries. They're a larger fruit, but they don't produce all at once. You can see the bees are working on these because they're in flower right now. It's usually recommended you plant 3 different varieties to cross-pollinate, and it's not 3 of the same. That's one of the things we really stress with people trying to, because of their nature, you can pick a bowl through a good part of the summer, and they're really colorful in the landscape in the fall, so you can plant them in with your shrub border, and the red, yellow, orange in the fall is just spectacular. So a landscape feature along with an edible thing that the kids are going to have a ball with, and you'll enjoy yourself.
So this is a Patriot high bush blueberry, and you can see here the beautiful buds just coming in.
Yeah,
right
the flowers
now
are just coming on with them, and they produce their fruit shortly after these flowers start to fade. The bees have a great time here because we have a number of varieties and different plants that flower through a little bit longer period. As soon as this flower drops, then the fruit starts to form. When you're looking into that casing, you're seeing the fruit that is starting to generate. Well, and you have to come back in a month's time because we'll let you have taste tests here and see which variety that you like best, because we really have a nice selection. Something people need to know about them is that they grow fairly large. This one's probably going to be 5 feet tall, and that they need an acidic type soil. So we sell a soil mix here that creates that soil mix for the plant. Then you're guaranteed to have success with it. They take a long time to produce wood, so bend the pocketbook all you can to get the largest plant you can afford, and that way you are going to see your production start sooner. You start with a very small plant, you've got a kind of a 5-year wait, but when you start with a larger plant, then you'll soon have some fruit, and they'll start to produce for you in a not too distant future. As you mentioned, Blake, people come in and they ask you what variety they should plant.
Yeah, I mean, and the nice thing is about coming in and being able to actually test out what varieties your palate
you're growing
prefers.
Exactly. As they do start to bloom or bear fruit in a few days time, then they can actually test them. But there's probably 10 different hardier varieties. We choose varieties that we consider to be some of the best, and then you need to mix 2 or 3 of them together. And we really can't give you a taste. There might be a sort of a variation with the soil conditions and how they taste, but it's certainly fun to come in when they're bearing, and you can do your own personal taste test.
Yep. So this is one of the most popular blueberries, and this is a Patriot high bush blueberry. We've got quite a few varieties. Polaris.
Another one that's really popular with us is a variety called Polaris. It's another high bush blueberry, and it would be a pollinator for Patriot if you chose, or many of the others.
Okay, so the Polaris high bush blueberry gets to be a bit shorter than the Patriot, but as George mentioned, those two will cross-pollinate with each other and would be blooming around mid-season, producing fruit mid-season or so.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. When you come in to choose, we have a tag on each one that tells you the hardiness, and zone 4 is quite a common height, and this one grows to 125 centimeters tall. So the the fruit is large on most of the high bush blueberries, and this one would be no exception to that. But you can't just grow all of one variety, even though that happens to be your favorite. You need to have the bumblebee looking after the pollination, and he's got to have another plant that's either planted nearby or in close proximity so that he can pollinate for you. And the choices are, I think it's 15 varieties maybe here at the moment, all chosen to be some of the hardiest ones, and all we consider to be productive in our area. And the wood, there'll be some dieback from year to year with them. This is not uncommon. Even in shade houses and being sheltered for the winter, there'll be a bit of dieback, but you have to allow them a bit of time in the early spring to make sure that you're not pruning prematurely, and a little bit of a cleanup each year, and you have a super healthy plant that will go on to produce for years. People planting small plants will wait a fair bit of time before they get a plant that grows up to the size that's going to really act as giving them a good production. But you can tell when you look at some of these larger ones that they really have a lot of fruit setting already. What variety do we pull here? This is Northland, and Northland is one of the ones that have been really promoted for a number of years, considered to be a really good producer, and perhaps one of the long-term most popular ones, really.
So George, this one here, how hardy would these actually be?
Well, this nocturne is considered to be a zone 3, which is, good in all around our area. It grows to about 1.5 meters in height, and obviously blueberries are sun lovers, so you need to have full sun for them, and an acidic soil. But one of the really good pluses is that you can get them in that type of a hardiness.
Yeah, definitely. So would these be something that you would have to cover up ever in winter?
It's probably not a good idea to cover them. You might choose, if you had the option, you might choose a more sheltered part of the yard, but you're looking for full sun, so it's about trying to find a location where they have a really good sun, maybe not the most windswept place, because as I said, there's that risk of a bit of dieback in the wood,
Right.
Question?
So with these ones, is this something that would kind of take over your yard if you planted it in kind of a central area where it does get a lot of sun?
No, they don't spread that overpoweringly. They form more of a bush that you can control, and if you needed to prune them back, there wouldn't be any problem to do that. Zone 4, again, hardy to our area.
Yep. Yeah, and for pruning, you said not too early in the season?
Yes, because sometimes you can't determine if the wood's alive or not. Some people get anxious and they might prune too early. Once it's leafed, most of its branches are leafed, you may find, like I said, a twig like this one that, that should be taken out. But if you were to do the pruning on it earlier on, you might miss, you might be taking more wood than you needed to. So it's nice to let them have a chance to start.
Right.
One of my promotions, and one of the things I love to tell people, is how colorful they are. The fall color on these is just spectacular. So you're going to get just a beautiful, they have almost like a green waxy leaf in the summertime, and then the autumn colors are spectacular. If you had room for a little run of them, partial hedge or something like that, you'd really have enjoyment of the fruit. You get the you get the bees. It's a pollinator, for so many other plants in your garden.
Yeah.
And a fall color to throw in there to make it really enjoyable. We can see the bees working here, and this is bumblebees, and sometimes some honeybees make their way in. The flowers, when they're on like this, just really are attracting. So Blake, what would you recommend to our customers if they wanted to put in some blueberries? What would be sort of 3 things to be careful of?
Well, as you said, the acidic soil is a big thing. So you do want to make sure that the soil is rich, nutrient rich, and has a high pH. In addition to that, definitely a lot of exposure to sunlight. and also you'd want the soil to be really well drained. They wouldn't like wet feet.
No, it's nice to have, you know, either a mounded bed or you know, a rich organic mixture is ideal for them. If your blueberries planted and you're looking for another complementary plant that would fruit for you, a lot of people like to do the haskabs. What's the common name for that, Blake?
They're called the honeyberry.
Honeyberries have they're filled with antioxidants. You need a pollinator. Now, in this case, we have two varieties in the one pot. So you could put this in as one plant, but you have Borealis and Cinderella both growing in the same pot. You see two different plants at the base. Therefore, your pollinator is already here. And they're extremely hardy. They're much like a they're much like a honeysuckle in a sense, and they're in a similar family. But really, another one to add to your berry collection.
Yeah, and they are really rich in antioxidants as well, so the health benefits are great.
It's called one of the super fruits, I guess.
Yeah.
If you already have your vines planted, the kiwi fruit is a bit smaller when the fruit produces than kiwi you might pick up in the stores, and you need pollination with these. So this particular plant has two varieties in the pot, two different plants. Now, once you have a pollinator, you could have several of another variety if that was your choice. Zone 4, hardy in the area, take a long time to really get productive and make quite a large vine for you. Like it's on the pot it's saying that it'll grow up to 6 meters tall, and they do. You can put them on a trellis that's sturdy. Some people grow them, you know, weave them up in through the base of trees, or you know, you can put up a wire for them, kind of like growing grapes in a sense, but really a very entertaining thing to have in your berry collection.
And would those be just as hardy as like a blueberry?
These are a zone 4, you know, so they're going to grow well in our area. You have a sun deck that's too bright. You just build a little lattice work over top, and you plant your grape in the ground. It grows up over your lattice and gives you shade, and the fruit hangs down through the lattice you put up over top. It's just a win-win situation, especially if you're getting to the point in life where you don't sit in the hot sun as much. Then the grape takes advantage of the sunlight. You get the shade, and you know, it's a really an enjoyable thing. You can have a great choice of grapes. There's wine grapes, white seeded grapes. You can get some that are going to be similar to something you'd buy in the grocery store, or you can get one that's really productive that has a smaller fruit that would make, you know, grape juice and jellies and that sort of thing.
In comparison with other fruits that you'd be producing, would grape require a lot more maintenance?
Maintenance is a pruning maybe once a year. It's not a heavy maintenance thing, but they really like a rich soil. So you should spend a lot of time preparing the area where you're going to plant, so you get a really good rich root system established. Thinking that down the road the trunk of one of these vines could be 5-6 inches across. Oh wow. And still be productive. Yeah. And so you're looking long range. So it's not about digging just a small hole, but a really good size hole with lots of rich organic material in there to grow them from. Put them in a very sunny place. They develop most of their sugar at the end of the season, so they should be, you know, up against maybe a garage wall that's really plain. Is a great place, because if you had a early frost in the fall, you could cover them just for one night, and then maybe have 3 weeks past that when they're going to do really well. But grapes are very productive in New Brunswick. A lot of people overlook that, you know, so it's an enjoyable thing to grow. Yeah.
And would they require, you know, kind of the hottest sun that we can muster?
Yeah, for sure. That's the sunny spot. In some of the rich vineyards in France, you might not find rich soil when you're looking, but rocks. They put rocks around the base of them to attract the summer's heat. So they pile the rocks from the area just around the base of the vine, and that keeps the vine warm in the summertime and gives them lots of punch to keep on growing.
Wow, very cool. When would you know actually to harvest the grapes?
Well, usually in New Brunswick, the raccoons tell you that. You know, they seem to know the day they're at their full ripeness, you know. But, you know, because it's a cluster of grapes, you can choose one and test them. And there are different times you can choose a grape that would produce earlier or later, you know. But it's when the sugar level suits you, you know. So you could take fruit off at any time. In the spring of the year, people prune them before the leaves come on, but be careful if you're starting a new plant, because they need some heat before they really leaf out. I have a plant at my home that somebody brought back in because it was dead, and I realized it wasn't. I took it to my house, and it now has a trunk about 5 inches across. It was several years ago, and the plant 1 year produced 320 clusters of grapes. I was actually using it to screen my dog pen, so I was just letting it ramble. The clusters weren't large. If you prune some side branches, you can get bigger clusters of fruit by allowing them to to have a more resources go into that one cluster,
Right.
so you limit the number of branches if you're growing them for shade or for screening. Then you can just let them ramble. But if you want to produce really large classic clusters of fruit, you prune them back a bit and choose the leaders.
Okay. Well, I mean, a lot of people are surprised at the varieties that we're actually able to grow in New Brunswick. I mean, we can grow grapes and kiwis, but in addition to that, we can actually grow peaches, plums, and pears as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sweet cherries, another one that and some of these, like grapes are good. One doesn't need a pollinator, but plum trees, a lot of the plum trees would require a second variety in the same family. So you could have a blue plum, so you could find Stanley and Mount Royal here that are self-fertile, but you'd also find Italian plums, and you could put 2 or more varieties in and then expect them to produce really well for you.
Yeah. Now, here at Scott's we have both European varieties and Japanese varieties of plum. Can those cross-pollinate?
No, you need to have 2 selections from either the European group or 2 varieties from the Japanese group.
Okay.
So you can't mix one and another. And we also sometimes have American plums in, which again is a different. So the pollination for these is very important. I always tell people to write the name of any fruit tree they plant on the inside of the garage wall or their house plant, or someplace that they'll have it 10 years later. Because if you ever lose one, then you know what you need to pollinate the other. So you need to know, this one's planted at the corner of the garage is going to be a Macintosh apple, and the one just around the corner, that's a Cortland, so that you're sure that you have your pollination there. Apples are probably one of the things that are most popular for home gardeners in New Brunswick. There's orchards throughout the central part of New Brunswick and the southern part. We sell apple whips. Some of the varieties in the whips are novelty ones that are a little harder to find. We have apples. If you only had room for one apple tree, you might want to plant a 4-in-1 where there's different varieties grafted on the same tree, and one branch will pollinate another. So these are interesting fruit trees for a small property space. Now in New Brunswick, it's interesting because you have so many wild apples that sometimes you can plant a tree that needs pollination and get it without realizing. It could be the neighbors, or it could be in the country we have a lot of line fences that have tremendous amount of old apple trees growing, which could act as a pollinator. And in some cases, flowering crab can act as your pollinator. So Blake, what should people know about planting an apple tree?
Well, I mean, you definitely do need good exposure to sunlight. So a really well lit area that does have a bit of protection. There are some tenderer varieties that could be damaged a little bit in the winter winds if you're not too careful, if you plant it in an open field. Other than that, I mean, well-drained soil, definitely. A lot of people tend to plant them on a bit of a slope, just so they can ensure that there's no water pooling around them.
Probably one of the areas is perhaps pollination.
Yes.
You need 2 different families in apples. Like Cortland is one that I recommend a lot. It's an apple that can be eaten off the tree. It can be used in cooking, and it keeps reasonably well. But Cortland's on its own background. My reason for pushing it towards people starting orchards is that it's on its own background history, so it'll pollinate most other varieties. Flowers mid-season. So if you had a Cortland and a Macintosh, for example, one would pollinate the other.
Yes.
Macintosh you have to be a little bit careful with, because there's Nova Mac and Jersey Mac and Spur Mac, and all of these are types of Macintosh that were started off the same family tree. What would you tell people about, should they stake them or should they put in some soil? What would you recommend if they're planting?
Well, I mean, definitely making sure that the soil around the tree is nice and rich. So adding some fertilizer with it, some compost or something like that would really be beneficial for the tree. And in the first couple of years, I mean, staking a tree is not a bad thing for sure. You don't want to tie it up too tight, or else you'll actually kind of inhibit its ability to strengthen itself by getting knocked around by the wind. But definitely for the first couple of years, you'd probably want to put a stake by it.
Yeah. Some of the growers use straw to keep the weeds down. The straw is tubular and it holds the summer's heat, so that can be cut up straw around the base. You do have to, in the fall, protect them from field mice. So as important as how you plant them is that they should have a protection window screen or spiral plastic around the trunk, because in the snow level, the field mice can girdle the tree and you might lose what was otherwise a healthy tree just from from damage from mice.
Yeah.
I think the first question is, how long are people going to wait to get fruit?
Yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, it does take a little while once you've actually got the plant established. We do sell the whips, as you said, but most of the trees that we sell would actually be about 4, maybe sometimes 5 years old. So these are already established, are already good, strong, healthy trees. But there is a rule kind of where they will start producing a decent amount of fruit once the trunk is about as big as an orange.
Yeah, once they've got a good size to support the fruit. Most of the trees we sell are semi-dwarf apples. Semi-dwarf are a little hardier than the dwarf, and they're not quite as large as a standard apple tree. Therefore, they're easier to harvest in the fall, and you can actually prune them to keep them more compacted if you chose to. And everyone asks about how close they have to be. Most of the literature talks about how close you can actually put them in an orchard. So they're often talking about maximizing your space. But in your home landscape, you could have one on either side of the property. When they get larger and flower freely, as long as they're in a sight line, they can usually pollinate well for you.
Right.
Choosing the right varieties is a priority.
Yes.
Staking them, fertilizing, or having some good organic material.
Yep.
Would we have to spray them? It's probably something you'd have to plan to do down the road.
Yes.
We use a lot of dormant oil and lime sulfur as a preventative spray in the wintertime when the leaves are off, and in the summertime we use a rotation of copper and sulfur to keep apple scab at bay, and these sprays do eliminate a lot of insects. Mm-hmm. There's little traps with sticky material on them that you can hang in the tree to attract the insects that are. And what happens with apples is the insect is usually going to be in the fruit because he was attracted to the bloom as it's fading, and he moves into the tree. But you have to be careful spraying, because we don't want to harm the bees, and so you don't spray until immediately after the flowers have faded. Mm-hmm. That way it's there at the right timing, but you're not interfering with insects that would act as your pollinators, your partners in this. So in terms of a good sized tree, plant it with lots of fertilizer, stake it so the wind doesn't damage it, mm-hmm. protect it in the fall, and choose 2 different varieties for pollination.
Mm-hmm. And you'd be looking at a few year wait until you actually get the fruit once you've actually planted a tree this age, so probably maybe 4 years or so, 5
That's
years.
right. Here in the nursery, because of the stress of being dug, they flower freely, and often these little trees will be just loaded with fruit, but a grower would probably take those off. When they're this size, the fruit can actually break limbs, if it was really loaded with fruit, because the tree's not ready to support it.
Right.
And a big part of the pruning, which is another area altogether, but is done in the wintertime. The pruning isn't for shape, it's about making them support the fruit. And there's some branches that will grow straight up. Those are usually referred to as water sprouts, and they are generally non-productive. So it's the branches that are more horizontal that do bear. And you can choose which limbs you keep, so that they're not all on one side, and so pruning is a completely It's an art form, but keeping in mind that there's lots of good information available to you, and we'll do all we can to help you if you have specific questions on that.
A lot of people come in, George, and they're looking for a really nice solid tree, and they're coming in and looking at the lot. We've got so many trees out here. Kind of what are you looking for when you're looking for a good solid tree?
Yeah, I look for a solid main trunk and a tree that hasn't got any severe breaks on it. There's a little breakage here, but that happens in the nursery. And when you remove a branch like that, you take it so you're not damaging the collar. Just cleanly cut it off, and then one of the things that you should be aware of is what I refer to as a bad crotch in a tree, and a lot of growers would actually cut off one of these major limbs because a really sharp V, like we're looking at there, is a chance for a tree to split later in life. Just imagine this branch being, the size of a mature apple tree, and having a windstorm like Arthur come through. It might split the main trunk and just do so much damage to your tree. So if we lost it on that branch on the early stages, we could probably have a much better shape. Trees are pruned by growers, such as this one, where they cut off a branch to help it form the head. And that branch that's been cut off should continue on to form a single leader again. And in some cases, if you're not careful, you can have a branch that has this really, really sharp crotch. And that's the kind of thing that we're sort of concerned about in terms of down the road maybe possibly having breakage. So taking a little bit of time to look over the structure and talk to our people about which one they would recommend. When you have 30 trees come in, some are better shapes than others.
Right.
The branches that you choose, the lateral branches, are the ones that are most productive. And so pruning down the road is about pruning for a good solid structure to hold the fruit.
Great. Okay, so we looked at, the fruit trees alone. There are apricots, plums, all sorts of different fruits that we can grow here. A huge variety of trees and shrubs. Where do you start?
It's endless, the different things that we do have available. But as you look around with the apples, pears, plums, and a lot of the vines and bushes, currants and gooseberries we didn't cover today, but there's just so many different things that are so enjoyable in a home garden.
Yeah.
What should our viewers be doing?
Well, if you go on and you like the videos and you find it helpful, definitely subscribe.